As I told you when we started a mere 3 weeks ago, that this would probably be a course that went by very quickly. And as I look at this as an introduction to Module 4, which is the last module, by the way, as you well know, uh, you've had immersion in everything that I would teach, whether online or face-to-face, if we had 6 weeks or if we had standard 15. The one thing that we can't do, and I feel bad about that, but you are all lifelong learners. If nobody's told you that yet, you better be ready for it. You will never stop going to school. As an aside, I don't have a cliche I use with everybody. Old people like me tell stories. A very quick one. When I finished my doctorate, my dissertation advisor there were 6 of us in the cohort that finished together. And he brought us all together at his palatial home, fed us a lovely dinner, and then started talking about the rest of our educational future. That was a long time ago. And I really was the youngest in that cohort, and I really hadn't decided. So he said, well, Mr. Parsons, I want you to think about it. He said then a little later before we left, he said, I want to see you in the office. Well, is it convenient tomorrow or the next day? I said, whichever one you want, sir. And he said, I'm going to give you some advice. Some of your colleagues have already asked for recommendations. They're going to go on to law school. And I said, and that's something I do not want to do. I had a decision to make when I started this doctorate if I want to go into law school, and I don't. He said a number of them are interested in getting an MBA so that they can do financial element, might become a chief fiscal officer at an institution. And I said, well, I don't mind it. That's a funny story too, but I won't go into it. But it's not something I want to make a career of. He said, well, I'll tell you what I did. He said, I paid a lot of money for my education. When he finished his degree at the University of Chicago, it was one of the top 5 schools in the country. He said, I decided I paid all the money I wanted to pay out of my pocket. So he said, I will get you started, I'll give you some advice, but there are lots of postdoctoral studies out there. And he turned out to be very accurate. And I've had 7 of them, ranging from, first one was at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, all the way to the one that I probably value the most, which was a 10-day intense study at Oxford in England. And I didn't pay more than 25% on any of them. So you should be thinking about being a lifelong learner. In fact, after I finished the Oxford one several years ago, I happened to return my wife to her native land, as it were. She was born here, but she's tremendously Irish. So we went to Ireland, mainly to Dublin, because the weather, when we go visiting the country, the weather was bad. So I did go to Trinity College, and I spent some time with some very bright people at Trinity, and since have done some shared research with them. So there's a lot to be found. And again, the Trinity thing cost me nothing. So what should I say about Module 4? First thing I should say is that it is our synthesis unit. Now, what does that mean? It means it's your opportunity to demonstrate that you have a grasp of how the budget and finance part of education, K-12 or higher ed, how it actually works. And the best way to do that is to extract from what we've done to a topic that's of vital interest to you. As I said, a good number of you have already done that. And by now you better. And it looks to me like they're going to be very, very exciting. But they all will do exactly what I just described. You're going to assess them. And I sent the higher ed folks some slides on this whole issue of adequacy, equity, and equality. That is a very good conceptual framework with which to work. So anyway, the first thing you're going to do is describe. You could almost use a micro-dissertation process to do this. You'd introduce your topic. You'd say a little bit, and I must congratulate all of you, by the way. You've made fine use of resources beyond just the text and the material that I've sent you. You've done some wonderful work. You helped me with my summer reading, at least half a dozen books will be added to my collection before we go back to school in August. So anyway, then you're going to go into how did you select your topic, and how did you go about analyzing your topic? You have the generic tools of adequacy, equality, and equity. But how do you go about to take apart whatever it is you're going to be writing about? And you get some help, because the last chapter of the text, and it's, now I'm basically talking about the K-12 text, and its epilogue do that very well. I've sent my higher ed colleagues some material to read so that you'll be able to do this. There are two things it's going to be important that you think about when you do this. One strategy that I want to see is, how do those three concepts really work? Can you demonstrate from something you've read, something that your interviewee told you, or something that you know from personal experience, does advance the situation in which your project is found, the subset in the budget that it's found, or does it retard it for lack of structure, lack of funding, lack of sufficient personnel? All of those things are real. They enter into how things get done. The other thing that I care for that you understand, I said you can be an auditor or you can be an accreditor. Think about what you want to be. If you have a real interest in going on in K-12 or higher ed, or once you finish your doctorate, you will need to get yourself some more in-depth funding. That's why, as I gave you the example earlier, about 2 of my 6 colleagues went out and got MBAs. And by the way, have done very, very well. Moved up to actually be directors of programs at major universities. The other thing that you need to give some thought to is when you have your degree, work with whoever your mentor is where you are working, and ask to be nominated. I assume that most of you are Maryland. I may be wrong, but if you're in the 5 Middle Atlantic states, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland, we come through middle states. There's a New England. I don't know that any of you are from New England, but if you were, there's a group that works with them. The largest in the country is called North Central. It ranges from West Virginia all the way to, believe it or not, New Mexico. Get yourself nominated. It's a wonderful, in-depth learning experience. You'll never learn any more, any briefer period of time, than serving as an accreditor. So I want you to be able to use some of these things. Also want you to understand a couple concepts. You might want to mention, if you've had any dialogue, or maybe even if you've kept the lines of communication open with your interviewee, find out how some of the work that they do appeared in something called the management letter. Anyone who has any responsibility for a program at some point in their career is going to interact with the board of your institution or the board of your district with an accountant. And that accountant is going to present to the governing board of the school a management letter, which has 3 elements to it. This was done as expected. That's kind of the mid-range. We recognize and laud you for what you did. That's getting a gold star. And there's the one that you never want to get. And I only ever got one in over 50 years in this business. And that was, we view with alarm. And I was able to not have to be responsible for that because I was handed a program when I joined the staff. And the gentleman who had been head of that program got most of his statistics out of the sky. And that was before we had the cloud. Now, the other thing that's worth looking at, you should be able to say a little bit, particularly from your interview, from some of your reading. And one of the things that budgetary people want to know is, in this area, did the individual or group that's running the area, did they document, did they demonstrate that what they have done was a value-added experience for that activity in whatever institution you're talking about, an individual school, a campus of a university, or a district. We all want to be able to say that what we did made a difference. And the jargon used by budget and finance folks is value added. Just as an example, what does value added mean? Suppose you were looking at the experience we had those many years ago to put in that child care center, uh, taking kids from about 6 months on up to 4 years old. One of the studies that our institutional research office did, we're all very proud. By having that center and funding that center and staffing that center, we reduced the withdrawal rate of those adult learners by 25% in the first 3 years that center was open. So, as always, this has been an exciting experience for me. I have learned a great deal. I made, I hope, some new friends. As I've said to you earlier, I'll conclude on this note. There's an old cliche, comes from the fact that I have a Chinese daughter-in-law. And for the first few years that she and my son were married, I kind of felt like she was keeping me at arm's length. And then I talked to a Chinese friend of mine. He said, well, what you don't understand is that once the Chinese connect with you, once they say friend to you, that is a lifelong commitment that they make. And so after several years, she said that we were okay as in-laws, and we have been close and dear friends for, good Lord, 28 years, 27 years. Okay, my turn of the issue is a little bit different. If I have worked with you at any time, and I have because you're in this course, and I can be of any help to you, you have my phone number. It has not changed for a very long time. You have my email address. That has not changed either. Please feel free to call on me because it's a pleasure to work with you. And as I said earlier, you have kept my mind sharp and you've given me a lot of new, powerful learning experiences. And for that, I am very thankful.